Mhm.
Just to give you my background. I did retire from the Army back in '95 as a sergeant major. Served in Vietnam. I was a draftee back in 1967. Drafted into the Army. I was trying to get into the Air Force, but they didn't want me, and so I got my letter from Uncle Sam that said I want you. So I ended up in the Army.
Their
Um,
loss.
and so I was in Vietnam. I was in communications intelligence.
Wow.
There's not a whole lot I can tell you what I did over there. It's probably all declassified now, but I just I'm old school where some of the stuff I heard, saw, and passed along. It was I had a security clearance above top secret. It was a code word clearance, special compartmentalized clearance. So a lot of the stuff that I knew that was going on over there, I was able to filter down and to the point where I could understand it. Um, I know we're not here to talk about Vietnam, but I draw a correlation between what happened in Vietnam and just what happened in Afghanistan, and a lot of people are doing that.
Yeah.
I can tell you when I was in Vietnam that the information I had access to, essentially what we did, we would disseminate the information to the Green Beret, to the Rangers, and to the other combat troops in Vietnam. For them, we would locate where the enemy were and determine what they were doing, and then we would provide that information to combat troops to go do something about it.
Right.
But in the course of doing that, just like my time in Afghanistan, which I'll talk about, and now I'm a 19-year-old kid. I'm dumb as they come. I'm 19 years old. I think I'm going to live forever. I was relatively safe because where I was in Vietnam, I was with the 25th Infantry Division, but we were not allowed. We were not allowed to enter into direct combat because of the equipment that we had. Our cryptological equipment was more important than fighting the enemy. In fact, should our position become overrun or unattainable, we had thermite grenades. You guys familiar with thermite grenades? You pull the pin, drop it, it just melts everything. It melts iron. Well, we had these boxes we called gray boxes, and they were the cryptological equipment, and they were lead. Had a lead shell to them. They weighed like 150 pounds, so it took two guys to carry them, and they weren't much bigger than an office printer, a small desktop printer. But anyway, yeah. So if our position became overrun, we weren't supposed to go to the bunkers to protect it. We were supposed to grab those thermite grenades and stay inside our compound. And if when we got the word that we were going to be overrun, unscrew the top of the cryptological boxes, put the thermite grenades on, and pull the pin, and just run like hell. Wow. And then we can save ourselves. But the cryptological boxes were the first to go. But in the course of handling that type of information, even as a 19 and 20-year-old, I saw that what we were doing in Vietnam wasn't going to work the way it was conducted because it was only the United States. We had the Australians over there and some Koreans over there. But we didn't have, at least from what I saw, from the information that I saw, there was too much support from the Chinese and the Russians. And later on, we found out that there was a big spy ring back here in the United States that was passing along some of the information that I had access to the enemy, actually to the Russians, who passed it to the Chinese and then passed it to the Vietnamese. So it gives you a little bit of background on my Vietnam adventure. I actually got out of the Army for 2 years and then rejoined the Army and then stayed in, became a lifer. So, and my last assignment in the Army as a sergeant major, I was working, I had the same clearance as when I retired as I had in Vietnam. I was working actually with NORAD, U.S. Space Command out in Colorado Springs. And I can tell you a lot of the stuff that you hear about the UFOs and stuff like that. I'm so glad they came out and said they can't explain it because they were monitoring this stuff back in 1995 in NORAD and in Space Command. They were doing it. And they had satellites in space that were monitoring other satellites. And they were said they were in space because there's a lot of junk that's floating around in space, from spaceships and things.
Yes, sir.
And they had satellites up there. I guess I should say, satellites that could pick up something the size of a boat. You're talking maybe 2 inches, maybe that big, in space. Pinpoint where it was, and broadcast that stuff back to whoever was monitoring the space station. Anyway,
I'm listening.
they could alter course to avoid that space junk.
Right.
So, in the course of doing that, they would also, because there was, I don't know if you guys ever saw the film. Anyway, there was a portion of the film that was inside Cheyenne Mountain, where NORAD is. And they have the three big screens, and it shows that they're showing things that are going, well, that's true. In fact, they had more than that. But they would always have one screen to one side that was showing this other stuff would pop up. And the other stuff would be the things that we would call the UFOs. And they would say, oh, there's another one, and they would record it. So the stuff was going on, but they didn't make light of it until here recently. And that was, that's kind of blown up.
How long ago was that?
This was 1994, 95. I retired in 95. So it was 1994 and 95.
And it took them this long to come out with something. That's almost, 30 years?
Yeah.
Almost,
so,
yeah.
But I think someone mentioned stuff going on as being a diversion. I think all that stuff is diverting us from what was happening in Afghanistan. To draw our attention away to some degree. But moving forward to Afghanistan, and again, I was listening to what some of you folks were talking about.
Yes.
I went over there as a contract for Department of Defense, and I was in Mazar Sharif, which is in the northern part of the country. And it was funny when I was over there training the Afghan army. Along with us were the Germans and the Brits in that area, and that portion of the country was at least a part of the province that I was in was as flat as a pancake. And to the north of us were the mountains, and on the other side of the mountains was the country, Uzbekistan. And what was unique was I was in a Camp Tillman in Mazar Sharif. And right outside our camp were all of these Soviet tanks and artillery pieces that the warlords surrendered to the Americans when we came into Afghanistan in 2003, I think it was, or 2001, right after, the 9/11.
Mm-hmm.
And they gave the weapons over to the Americans. It says, we're here now, we'll take over the fight. But what was interesting about Mazar Sharif in Balkh province, it was one of the last strongholds of the warlords. And it was also the province where a greater portion of the opium was grown in Afghanistan. And so there was a rumor to be, now I wasn't in the intelligence business then, but with the soldiers that I dealt with and talked to, rumor had it that the reason why it was relatively calm there is because the farmers were turning over the opium to the Taliban, who were selling it. And that's how they were financing some of their operations. Okay.
Wow.
So they didn't mess with Mazar Sharif in that area because we simply said, you want us to burn this crop? We'll burn it. We'll take it out. And the Afghan government was saying the same thing. We'll take this out. But, everybody had their hand in the pot. The Taliban got some of it and the government got some of it. When we were there to train the Afghan soldiers, we weren't there to worry about the opium crop or anything like that. But it was interesting because it was very peaceful. And one of the warlords who was absorbed into the Afghan army and then he later went into the government, his last name is Dostan, Dosten, and I heard his name mentioned recently on talking to some of the people, some of the Afghan officials. So apparently he was still in the government up to this day. Well, when he was there, the Taliban, that's one of the reasons why they didn't mess with that province, because he was there and he was a warlord. He kicked ass. He said, I don't care who you are, I'll kill you. And the other thing about that particular province was it was close to Uzbekistan, which had I guess they had a history with Afghanistan of being warlike to them. And there was always a thought if the Taliban came in, if they took control of the province at that time, that the Uzbekistan army would come across and fight the Taliban. That didn't happen, so I don't know if that rumor was true or not.
Sergeant Major, could I ask you this? I don't mean to interrupt you. I just wanted to ask, you're talking about Uzbekistan and their relationship in Afghanistan. I've always said that Afghanistan is so fractured with the tribalism within its own country, with the Uzbeks, because I know that's one of the main tribes
Uzbek,
up there. Mm-hmm. Is that why? I mean, is that what the Uzbekistan?
I was going to mention, I think there's 5 main tribes in Afghanistan: Uzbeks, Tajiks. There's the Pashtuns.
So many more. Yeah, so many more too.
And the Pashtuns are like the upper class ones. They're like in the eastern part of the country. And then you have the
Native actually served too. Just to let you know, Native was in the military too.
Thank you.
Yeah. Oh. So and I forget the name of the tribe that's on that piece of Afghanistan that runs up into China, and they were the Asian-looking ones. The Chinese. Wow. That was a different tribe. So there's like 5 main tribes there. And
I mean, do they even recognize the border? These different tribes.
I think.
Do the borders mean anything to them?
I don't know if if you're talking about, was there a lot of moving in across the border? I'm sure there was. I know that the bridge that went from Balkh province, Afghanistan, into Uzbekistan, whatever that river was, I think there was a guard shack on the Afghan side, but there was an open border on the other side. Wow. So if you get by the Afghan guard leaving, you can just go into the country.
Yeah.
Now, where that bridge was very desolate because it was high desert. I mean, it was not very inviting country, and it's probably why it was not guarded. But to get back to the tribal issues there, the Pashtuns were in the eastern part of Afghanistan, and I was also, when I left Mazar Sharif, I came back to the States for a while, and I went back over, and I was in Gardez, which is an eastern part of the country. And it's funny how the people there, I know we talk about racism in this country. And the racism over there wasn't based on your skin color. It was based on your tribe. Wow. That's my understanding of it, because there were people in the Afghan army. My job was to teach the Afghan army, we worked side by side with active duty or National Guard or Reserve soldiers. We had Air Force there, we had the Marines there, we had the Navy there, Coast Guard was there, and we did with the Allied nations. The issue I had in Afghanistan training soldiers, I was a chief advisor to a brigadier general, an Afghan brigadier general, who was, I wish I could remember the name of that tribe, and the Chinese, anyway, the Asian looking. And he had a Tajik, an Uzbek, and a bunch of Pashtun soldiers and other officers under him. And not one of those other officers, or NCOs for that matter, respected that general. Because he was easy. He wasn't like them. And they would, he had and he was one of the most diligent. He of all the officers that I did mentor some NCOs as well, but of all the officers that I mentored, he had to be the one that was trying to do his damnedest to get things done correctly. You tell me what I need to do. Show me what I need to do. Let's work together. His biggest problem was trying to get his staff to work with him. And it wasn't because his staff wasn't trained, because we had other people training his staff, and I trained some of his staff also. It was that he didn't look like the rest of them. He was an Asian. He had the Asian features. The Pashtuns are more, I don't know, like Indians or whatever. They're more packed. They're more social. Their social is more into Pakistan. the
So, I mean,
Tajiks.
do you think this is one of the main factors to why the Afghan army that we've been building for 20 years is so, for lack of a better
Miserably
word,
failed.
yeah, sorry. I mean, because there's no, like you just said, they didn't respect their own general because he was from a different tribe. I mean, that tribe, is that like the root of why the Afghan army is just not capable of?
I would have to, in my opinion, it is because there were times where I would have to argue on the general's behalf to get something done with an NCO. In my job as a contractor, I wasn't allowed. I was supposed to be neutral because I'm a trainer, and I'm not supposed to pick a side. But when I'm training, I have a brigadier general who is in charge of probably a group of about 800 people, and they're not showing him the respect due him because of his rank. And that's all I'm looking at, to make sure he gets the respect due his rank. There were times I'd have to step in and just say, you're nuts, you're foolish. And I had interpreters, and I would actually get into an argument and say some things, and my interpreter would refuse to interpret. And I said, well, I understand that because you, as a young man, can't say that to an older man. And we had that thing going on too. I said, but I'm just telling you, as clearly as you can enunciate it in your own language, tell this person what I just said. So I honestly believe that is one of the reasons why there was a collapse. It wasn't necessarily because we weren't there, because we trained those guys. I can tell you, there were some, obviously, in any army, you're going to find some units that are much better than others, and some units that are simply just not effective because of leadership corruption or whatever. But I was associated with two different divisions, the 209th Division up in Mazar Sharif and the 203rd Division in Gardez. We had a fine bunch of young people. I can say young people because of my age, but we had a fine bunch of young soldiers, sailors, Marines, and airmen, males and females, who worked their asses off to train those people and make sure they did what they had to do and do it right.
Right.
I wasn't in the combat role. In my company, we were not employed as combat trainers. We trained administration, logistics, medical, things of that nature. But talking to people who did accompany the Afghans on patrol and stand there and be with them while they were being ambushed or while they got into some combat, I did not hear a bad thing about the soldiers at all. They said they fought like they were trained to fight. So I think, Native, what you're saying is the root of what happened, in my humble opinion, is because there was that racial divide by the tribe. I call it the tribe. I don't want to say racial because it really wasn't racial. It's tribal.
Right.
The tribal divisions within the country. Because I know I tell Prepper and Nisi, I say, hey, when you talk to my experience, from talking to like my interpreters, all young men probably between the ages of 20 and 30, spoke English perfectly, wrote in diary, wrote in English, translated I was talking, translate what I wrote. They had all, at one time or other, been out of the country. Well, the first checked in with their families because the Americans were there, and they took jobs as translators. But I would talk to them about about religion and about things, about their society and their history, and they would say Afghans identify themselves with their tribes. Like we say we're Americans, right? But an Afghan says, I'm a Tajik.
Yeah, so they have no sense of being Afghans.
No sense of collective
Gotcha.
collective
of being a nation. They don't care about it. Yeah.
It was tribal, and that's why when the Taliban were over there fighting, they had trouble taking over all of Afghanistan because the like I was saying, the warlords said, not in my watch, not in my territory, not in my town, not in my city. Right. You can do what you want to in Kabul, you can do what you want to in Mazar Sharif, but you ain't doing it here. And I'm going to make sure you
don't.
don't.
Taliban and them were scared of them.
Yeah, there was actually were, and that's why they meaning the Taliban, assassinated a lot of the warlords.
That's what happened.
Yeah.
I do want to ask you a question. I want to word it right though, but why do you think this has happened? Why do you think all of a sudden Biden did this, wants to yank everybody out, all mayhem breaks loose? What do you think the plan is behind that? Why did they do this?
Actually, Prepper, I think there was no plan, and that's why it happened. I think that I think you were talking about it, Judge. You were talking about Trump.
Yes.
He was going to do it, but he said how he was going to do it, but not when.
Exactly.
And he said, and if you don't, meaning you,
Yes.
Taliban, you mess with me, it's off. The deal's off, and we're going to start from square one.
Okay.
So, in answer to your right question, because Trump is Trump, and I'm obviously returning political here, that's fine. Trump is Trump, and Biden is Biden. Biden says Trump is playing, no, can't do it. Can't do it. It's not going to work. This is what we're going to do. Okay, what are you going to do? And then he makes a public broadcast. We're getting out of there on August 31st. That's like telling the enemy, or telling the bank robber, I'm going to leave the bank doors open and the vault unlocked at 9 o'clock in the morning, and I'm going to walk away.
Right.
So that's the answer to that question, But there was no plan. There was no plan. And
just an incompetent president.
Right.
It's insulting to me as a military guy, native probably the same, is the fact that he thinks we're stupid. That we actually thought that he had a plan, and they just didn't see what was going to happen. I don't think that's true. They didn't have a plan. He made a statement. He couldn't back down from his statement, and this is what happened.
Where does this go?
Let me get one more question in real quick before Just Josh gonna hit you with some questions. But
no.
Nisi talked to me. Nisi talked to me earlier, and she said something that you said to me. So I'm just gonna ask the question. But let's say you were contracting in Afghanistan today, right now. You were over there right now. Would you be nervous? Would you be scared? Are these 10 to 15,000 American citizens over there?
My mind is boggled about that, where they don't know where they can't get those. It's, I can't even comment to that. I'm stunned. But to answer your question, Pepper, I couldn't carry a weapon. I wasn't allowed to carry a weapon. If I was caught with a weapon, I'd be fired. We didn't have them. Okay. But I can tell you, we knew where to get them if we had to have them. When I would, and to give you an example of how things deteriorated when I was over there, when I first got there, I landed in Kabul, and we had to go to Mazar Sharif, and that was, 200 miles, probably 200 miles to the northwest.
Okay.
Beautiful drive, by the way. Hopefully someday you can see that it's just a beautiful up through the mountains and everything. But we did it in the Ford pickups, F-150s, and a couple up-armored Humvees. Convoyed it. Nothing happened. Pulled to the side of the road, did some rest stops and everything. When I left, I was in Gardez, and to get to Kabul, we could only fly on a helicopter because the roads were unsafe.
Wow. And that's later on.
Yeah. That's later on. That was in 2010. I left there in 2010. We weren't allowed. We could not go in a convoy.
Really?
We would drive. We had drivers. We weren't allowed to drive, but we had SUVs, and we had Afghan drivers. They drive us. If we had to go into Kabul, take the SUV, go to Kabul. We would do that. No weapons, nothing.
Wow.
And then when I left, we couldn't even get in a convoy. We had to fly. Not just us, but the only soldiers, the only non-combatants, the only way they could travel were in helicopters. They wouldn't even put us in up-armored Humvees anymore.
Wow.
And the reason for that is they needed the extra 1 or 2 soldiers in there in case they got attacked, rather than two unarmed passengers, right? We were a liability at that point.
That's crazy.
So,
Wow.
but anyway, if I was over there now, I'd be scared to death. Scared. I have not been scared too many times in my life, but I can imagine what some of those people are feeling like that are outside of Kabul. Maybe not so much in Kabul, but outside of Kabul, where your president says, hunker down, shelter in place. And then you get to the airport. Okay, Mr. President, how am I getting there? Well, we'll work on it. Don't worry about it. Now, if you think for one moment the Taliban are going to say, that's okay, don't worry about it. They can stay here as long as they can until they can get to Kabul.
Wow.
Anyway, that's just my take on it. And I hope I answered your question. But,
You did.
I appreciate you.
Just one more question real quick. You've been military since you were 19. That somewhere around 50 years you pay attention. I know you pay attention to everything that goes on with the government, with military, everything. In your entire life, have you ever seen our government just leave our citizens to the wind like they're doing with this? Just saying, you're on your. To me, it's like we're leaving a man behind, but it's 10 or 15,000 men behind.
No, when people draw the comparison between Vietnam, and I hate that when they do that, between Vietnam and Afghanistan, first of all, our military was out of Vietnam for 2 years when Vietnam collapsed. We were done. We were out of there. Okay. We had nobody in country. We weren't fighting the war. So to draw that comparison with what's going on in Afghanistan really galls me, because we weren't there. The panic that ensued in Vietnam obviously was not from the villagers, not from the outlying masses. It was from the people in the city of Saigon and other places, but particularly Saigon, who, let's face it, Saigon was like New York or Philly or Atlanta. It was a nice city, quiet, calm, middle class. It had its issues, obviously, but I think the people that we were talking about rescuing there, a lot of them were American civilians and Vietnamese civilians who had worked for the United States Army. And as it turned out, because my ex-wife, Lisa's mother, is Vietnamese.
Okay.
And her family remained in Vietnam after the war. And they were unaffected by anything that happened. So the horrendous, there were some killings and some assassinations of political and government people in Vietnam after the war. And there was some re-education of teachers and soldiers after the war. But let me tell you something. In 1996, I went back to Vietnam. Nisi's mother went to Vietnam to visit her family. And I said, what the heck? I'm going to go too. So I went back to Vietnam in 1996. And I couldn't believe what I saw. I said, everything in Vietnam, it was like being at home. It was being like being in Chinatown, in a big city. Okay. It was just, it's amazing. They were selling American automobiles. They had hotels going up. They had, it was a quiet, peaceful, beautiful city. And if there was communists, you couldn't have told me it was communist. You would not have known you're in a communist city. And what I thought was unusual is when I went over there, I asked my ex-wife, because she was staying with her mother, where are we going to stay? We're staying in a hotel. She said, no, I have it taken care of. I said, oh, okay. And she said, you're really going to pay? I think it was $20 a day. I go, oh, this is got to be the kind of hotel, $20 a day. Yeah. But I get over there, and because she had arranged to have a car, and she said, we're going to stay. I can't remember the name of that was on the building, but as I walked in, I saw obviously the Vietnamese, communist Vietnamese flag, and there was a soldier at the gate. I go, what the heck is this? Where are we going here? Right. And she said, this is a guest house. I said, a guest house? Well, what had just to show you the difference in what maybe is going to happen in Afghanistan versus what happened in Vietnam. I was a guest. The Vietnamese, because I was retired from the United States Army, they put us up in a Vietnamese Army guest house.
Ah.
We had an air-conditioned room. We had our own bathroom. And I thought, this is incredible.
Mhm.
This is incredible, the way they treated me, you know? And they were very respectful and everything.
It was like VIP.
That was a VIP treatment, you know? And she said, this is better than any hotel because I've seen hotels and this is better. And I go, okay.
Uh-huh.
But
Wow.
the other one other interesting story about that trip, my revisit to Vietnam, or two of them actually. But when I went to visit her mother, I went to her mother's house and we had dinner and everything. And it was after dinner one evening, I saw this person walking back and forth in front of the house on the street, an older gentleman with gray hair. And so I asked my ex, I said, well, who's this guy? What's he want? So she talked to her mother, and I guess her mother said, oh, he's a VC. He was VC. And I said, really?
Wow.
And so he
And
pointed
VC
he said,
VC was
hey,
the northern Vietnam.
you come
right?
here.
That
Yeah,
was the
Vietnam.
So
What was that like, Sergeant Major? I mean, knowing
that-
he was on the opposite side.
Yeah,
and there
that's
you are.
well. Here's the thing. I went out and I talked to him. I said, he did the Asian thing, bowing, and we shook hands. And through an interpreter, through my wife or my ex-wife as an interpreter, he said he asked me where I was, what unit I was with, what I did, and he was up north. And he came in and he fought around Pleiku, which is in north or central Vietnam. And I asked, he told me what unit he was in. I don't remember. And I said, I was with the 25th Infantry Division at Cu Chi. Oh, Cu Chi. And he started talking about, because Cu Chi, we found out later there was a big BC headquarters underneath the base camp, the U.S. Army base camp in Cu Chi.
wow.
But they kind of heard the tunnel rats. There was a base camp. Anyway,
Yeah.
so he was talking about that he was he says, we're not enemies now. I said, no, we're not enemies now. Obviously, we're not enemies. And it was a very short conversation, but he said, I've never met an American. You're the first American I've met. So I felt honored that he would,
Yeah.
and
Wow.
we treated each other respectfully and we went our separate ways.
Yeah.
Is that you think that's going to be possible with Afghanistan?
No, not at all. See, that's the other
me
thing. I'm going to
neither.
tell you something, and I say this from the bottom of my heart. And not just because DC has a kinship with the Vietnamese, but because what we couldn't do when we were over there fighting that war in Vietnam happened after we left. And I think it was because we were over there. You look at Vietnam now. I mean, just Google Saigon or Ho Chi Minh City, and see what it looks like. And everything that's going on over there is because of what the Vietnamese gained from our being there, even though we didn't, quote unquote, did not win the war. When we left, the Russians came in. They did diddly squat for the Vietnamese. They wanted their rice. They wanted their oil. They wanted their fish and all this other stuff for exports. Chinese did the same thing.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
I hate to cut you off.
No, that's quite all right. Sometimes I ramble, so that's okay.
I am learning so much from you right now. I appreciate you being here. Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
That's all right.
Where is Afghanistan headed? I can't wrap my head around it.
To be honest with you, I think they'll have a civil war because I don't think.
Okay.
Well, let me backtrack here. And I think Nietzsche just told me today that the Chinese and the Russians have already recognized the Taliban government. Is that true?
Seriously?
That's true.
No, I'm serious. I don't know. That's what I heard. That's true?
China definitely has. They put out a statement.
Okay.
Well, that's your answer.
Oh,
That's your answer.
know.
They're going to use them as a staging ground for whatever it is that they intend to do in this war.
absolutely.
And that's the difference when they compare Vietnam to Afghanistan. There's no comparison because even though Vietnam is a communist country, it has a middle class. It has well, you wouldn't even know it's a communist country because even though Saigon is officially called Ho Chi Minh City, nobody calls it that. They call it Saigon, and it will always be called Saigon. So to answer your question, I think internally, the Chinese or the Russians are going to make sure that there is no civil war.
Okay.
Because there are no more warlords. They're gone.
Yeah.
And because there are no warlords, something is going to have to fill that gap to
Gotcha.
make sure that the Taliban, even though they overrun the country, now they're playing nice.
Ah,
I don't trust them.
okay.
And I think the Russians and the Chinese, I don't think they don't need Afghanistan. It has mineral resources that have not been exploited. I believe it probably has some oil and gas. That
Okay.
might be what they're after. But I think, you know what they're doing? They see this big pile of shit that we left. They're
Uh-huh.
rubbing their faces in it.
Yes.
Right. Yeah.
And that's all.
Oh,
You know what, Sergeant Major? Also, the Chinese are brokering a deal with the Taliban. There's rumored to be $1 trillion worth of rare earth minerals in
Yes.
the mountains in Afghanistan.
Yes,
So I'm sure China's trying to get at that.
exactly. You know, what's the stuff that makes they need for cell phones? What is
Yeah,
that metal?
lithium.
Lithium.
Yeah.
You wait.
Mm.
Wait.
okay.
They're going to corner the market on that. Or some other gold. Maybe there's gold there.
I believe it. I
Yeah.
believe it.
Did y'all hear about what is it? The Ford company is shutting down some stuff because they don't have the computer chips to make the car.
Yeah.
Yep.
Have you looked at your car dealers? How many car dealers have a lot of cars on their lots? Very few of them. I know here, you're lucky if you see six new models on a lot, and they'll tell you the chips. We don't have the chips. We can't get the chips,
And that's China.
Yep.
Lithium.
and they're controlling that. They probably are controlling what we're using right now to some degree.
Yeah. Yeah.
So-
Oh, yeah.
Let me ask you this. This is kind of off topic, real quick. I just want to get it in because anybody that comes up or anybody in the chat, we always ask. But are you seeing any food shortages or anything going on around
No.
where you're staying?
No,
It's all pretty good.
it's good.
Yeah.
And
South Carolina, we got it going on. All right.
Where
Our
are you at,
governor-
South
Oh,
Carolina?
he's in Pennsylvania now.
Nate,
Oh, okay.
Nate, where are you in South Carolina?
I'm about 45 minutes from Florence, South Carolina.
Okay, I lived in Columbia for 10 years.
That's what Nisi had told me
Yeah.
earlier.
And I retired. I went into the Army at Fort Jackson as a private and retired there as a sergeant major. So I
Wow.
made full
Oh, wow.
circuit.
Yeah, full circle. Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Ooh, that's cool.
So
Yeah,
any questions, guys? Any questions? I whatever I'm telling you is from my own observation and from some things that I know to be true.
Right.
But I don't speculate on as much as I would like to get into a very long and
Right.
meaningful conversation about how crappy this country's becoming because of our leadership. I don't want to
Yeah.
really go there tonight.
Right.
I just
You know
want
what?
think
I
we all
did want
agree
to ask you one thing. I wanted to ask you one thing because you've been on the ground, because you've experienced Vietnam. My dad was a non-vet, and he said something similar to what you said about, decades later. He said so much blood and death was here, and now Vietnam's a tourist.
Yeah,
It really
it
is. He says it's a beautiful place to go now.
Yeah.
But anyway, I wanted to ask you about getting back to the tribalism, because you were there and you saw the people and how they reacted to what was going on. I was thinking about this the other day. We've been there for 20 years, and there have been children born in Afghanistan, young girls born in Afghanistan who grew up in a place where they could go to school. They learned to read and write, learn to drive, and go on. Someone went to college.
Yep.
And have become a part of the military there, all kinds of things. And they've never known the Taliban. But we were talking about the tribalism earlier. When you were there, what was the sense of younger people coming up under the occupation of the United States military and being experienced to this level of freedom? I mean, did you ever see anyone like that who were just glad we were there in spite of the tribalistic nature of the elders there?
I had really no interaction with children or women actually in Afghanistan.
Oh, really? Okay.
Oh no,
Okay.
let me put it this way. In Cortez, we did have a hospital. They called it a regional hospital, which the U.S. Army, Air Force, and the Polish military staffed. Okay, and in part of their staffing, they were training doctors nurses, technicians, and everybody in the Afghan army to do what we did. So in that regard, we did sometimes see women as nurses, civilian nurses there in the hospital, but we had no interaction with it. But what was interesting about the hospital, since we were the closest hospital, in probably 50, 60 miles, any combat casualties that the Afghans had, they would bring into that hospital. Our guys would go up to either Bagram or to Kabul or to Kandahar. They would bring their evacuated casualties to this particular hospital. And what was interesting was they would have Taliban injured Taliban coming to this hospital.
Oh,
And
okay.
yeah, they would bring
Wow.
them in and hold them prisoner while they were in the hospital.
Okay.
And it was amazing because they would allow the Taliban family visit them in the hospital like the Afghan soldiers' family to
Right.
visit them.
Right.
So we did have some security concerns there. But I remember one of my interpreters telling me, he said, the Taliban aren't going to mess up that hospital. They're not going to do that. They said, you're safe. Don't worry about it. Because they're getting their people, they're saving Taliban soldiers to fight again. They'll put them in prison somewhere, and then somebody will pay that money to get their son out. Their Taliban fighter out. You pay the money, they get them out of jail. But to answer your question, the people that were most grateful for us being there were the interpreters that I had, because, like I said, they were young. They were probably anywhere between 20 to 30 years old, most of them. Some of them had the equivalent of college education.
Right. Okay.
All of them had come back to Afghanistan, either from Pakistan, India, Uzbekistan, Iran, and came back in when the Americans were there. And some of them started families. And I remember they talked about how happy they were that they could get during Ramadan, they could go home and see their families, and they could take care of their daughters, their children. And
Right.
so I guess in that regard, there were people that were grateful they were there, and they did see the promise of what was ahead for them while we were there. And I don't think they, meaning the interpreters,
He's got a connection problem.
Who, me?
No, just Josh. Just because he dropped, I can
Oh,
see
okay.
it down low. Just to let everybody know, he didn't dip.
Okay.
He just got a connection problem going on.
All right. I was just going to say that because of us being there, I never heard any of my interpreters to be anything but optimistic.
Okay.
I guess they thought things were going to work out.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. All right. And then I did want to ask you too, being a sergeant major, being a senior NCO, you're familiar with being responsible for not only personnel, but the equipment that personnel uses, and the responsibility not only for yourself but your NCOs underneath you, making sure that equipment is always maintained and always accounted for. And one of the things that's blown my mind throughout this whole thing is how the military just left equipment laying all over the country just to be, unmolested, just to be constant, just pretty much given to the Taliban. And that didn't make sense to me, because I know my senior NCOs, I was a junior NCO, and they would have had my ass if I would have left one rifle behind, and so I just want to get your opinion on that.
And then, so what I would have to say to that is that they would not have done that unless they were ordered to do so.
Yes, sir. Absolutely.
Unless somebody got a phone call down from channel saying, drop what the hell you're doing. Whatever you can put in your duffel, get on the truck, we're going to the airport. Because you're exactly right. You're exactly right. You never, ever leave abandoned equipment. That's useful. And if you can't take it with you, what do you do with it? You destroy it.
You destroy it. Yes.
And
they didn't do that.
in Humvees
they didn't
and
do
everything
that.
else.
And there's no commander that I'm aware of, or no NCO specifically that I'm aware of, unless the Army's changed so much it's frightening, that would ever just say, get up and go.
Yeah.
Not unless somebody came to you and just told you, drop what you're doing leave. But
Yes.
sir, what about forget it? Get on that truck. That's what happened. And that's when I hear Biden say, well, how could we not have chaos? Yeah, it's very easy. You let your commanders do their job. I don't think the arm here's I don't know if this has ever come up. I don't think the military is in charge over there last few months.
Wow.
Don't seem like it.
I think it was being controlled from the Pentagon, from the White House. I honestly think that.
We
Not by the local ground commanders. No. Because they would not have let that happen.
No, not at all.
All right, we got a question from the chat. I think it was Tiger asked this question. Do you think we have to worry about the Taliban attacking the U.S. here in the USA again? You know,
well, if not the Taliban, somebody else. Yeah. Yeah.
So we do have to worry.
Oh, I mean, that's my personal opinion. I have no way of knowing that.
Right.
But we're weak right now. I think everybody sees that's a big deal. So to answer that, you know, and again, I don't want to get on this Trump versus Biden thing. Can't help it. I don't want to. But
it's fine.
That was not. I don't think we had to ask that question a year ago, 18 months ago.
Yeah.
Right.
Good point. Good point.
But now you're seeing people ask the question. And I think it's because there's no leadership. Absolutely no leadership.
All right, let me ask
effective leadership. Anybody can lead, but nobody can. Not everybody's effective. You know.
There you go.
All right, I got a question for you. In your, years of experience, years of life, everything through the Cold War with Russia, through the Vietnam War, through everything, have you ever? Do you think that America is more vulnerable now and weaker now than it's ever been in your lifetime?
I do, but I think it's because internally we're weak. Because of we've become tribal here almost. It seems like we're becoming tribal, and I think that's where we're weak. We're not unified, and it's going to infiltrate. One of the things, there's three things that keep a country strong. One is the military, one is the judiciary, and the other is the economy, or at least the ability to the free market. And right now, I think all three of those are becoming.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying? They're becoming. They're being twisted, and because right now, when I heard General Miley, because that's his name, Miley, he says he. I don't know how a 4-star general, chief of staff of the of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, say we didn't know what was going to happen. We didn't think it was going to. No one could have said it would last 33 days or 11 days. Yes, you would have known that if you had been in contact with your commanders on the ground in Afghanistan. And that's why I don't think they were in charge. If people on the ground in Afghanistan weren't running the war. I really, honestly, in these last few months, I don't think they were. They were too focused about getting out.
Yeah.
Because even in Vietnam, we drew down and we left. There was no panic when we left. I think some people equate, and I've heard people make this statement, the panic when the Americans left. They had showed pictures of people being taken off the roof of the embassy in Saigon when the Americans left. I'm going, time out. The Americans were gone. The military was gone 2 years before that happened. Yeah. I wasn't panicked because we pulled out our military. And I was panicked because the Vietnamese army was losing the war. We were gone. And the other thing was, that wasn't the embassy roof. That famous photograph, the helicopter and the people on the stairs going, that wasn't even the embassy. That was photo. And I wrote this down because it was
facts, folks.
It was a Pittman building. It was another building a half a mile from the embassy. And I hear people that's the embassy. I said, no, it wasn't the embassy. They flew a helicopter into the embassy to take out the embassy employees and the embassy staff. But that picture showing the Vietnamese trying to get into the helicopter was a half a mile away from the embassy.
Oh, okay.
Gotcha. I want to ask from the chat just because if y'all could just leave me a 1 in the chat for a big thank you for Vet70 for joining us tonight and giving us all this great info and great knowledge. If I could just get a press 1 in the chat for a big old thank you from everybody, because this has been really, really great. This has just been awesome, man. I don't know how much to thank you. You know what I mean? I don't know how to thank you enough.
I'll come back.
Awesome.
If you want,
awesome.
if you're happy, I'll come back.
Yes, sir.
Hell yeah. Hell yeah.
Yes.
Write down some questions.
Yeah, and
keep me from rambling. I'll answer questions.
Yeah, and Native does live shows, and I mean, you could do one-on-ones. Native is a great dude. Just Josh does live shows. He's not really doing interviews too much right now, but he might get into it. I mean,
the information.
Yes, sir. Hey, Sergeant Major, thank you for coming on and answering my questions. It's wonderful to meet you, and I'd love to pick your brain
Just
on all this stuff.
You guys again.
Your insights, I appreciate it.
Absolutely.
You're welcome.
And we got a ton of ones going on in the chat. A ton of ones. That's all. Every one counts as a thank you, and there's about 100 and 200 of them in there. So
really?
So
other people are saying this?
Yeah. There's actually we actually have 151 people in the chat, and then there's also other people watching that aren't in the chat. You won't see those numbers. But there's a bunch of people watching, man. This has been really, really, really cool.
Yeah, thank you, sir. Yes.
Can I say
Very welcome.
Can I just say this?
We'll do this again.
Awesome.
We need this information. Those of us who aren't military, those of us who are just kind of watching the news and just kind of seeing what's going on, we need this information, because where we're at right now with everything that's going on, we don't know about tribalism. We don't know about Uzbek.
That's never talked about, is it, on the news about the tribes? But
go ahead.
But that is the problem with that. Well, my humble opinion, the problem with Afghanistan is the tribalism. There's no cohesive. They're not cohesive as a unified population. You know, they are to a certain degree because they have, obviously they have a government and laws and things like that. But from an identity standpoint,
how's the Taliban going to govern? How are they going to govern? Are they going to go back to 1980, like barbaric?
Why do you think they governed that way before?
Okay.
I mean, that's all right. I'm just saying.
Okay.
I just wanted to say you're more than welcome to hang out with us. I don't know. What
actually,
kind of
I need some coffee, I'm going to let you guys go now. But I will come back. You know what? We'll do this again, Prepper.
Yes, indeed.
Do this again.
Absolutely.
I didn't know how it was going to go, but
it's all love. It's all love.
Yeah, it was awesome.
We need this information.
And the thing, and just to let you know, the thing about this community, you would love this community, because a lot. I know, like your political stances, your thoughts on things. I know a lot of that, and it fits right in with our community. I mean, you would be a great voice. I wish you had a channel, because it would be. You just don't know. People love to hear views and stories and all. You would have an awesome channel, and we could push the hell out of it. You know what I'm saying?
For real.
But I really truly appreciate you being here. I really do. And
that's all right, Prepper. I'm glad for the invite. I appreciate the invite.
Yeah, definitely. And I'll be in touch. We'll talk. We'll get it going again, and I'll get you hooked up so you can hook up with Native and Just Josh too. So maybe you could do something with them and do an interview with them. It'd be really cool. Really cool.
Yes.
All right. Well, thanks for being here.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Good night.
Good night.
Bam. That's what I always say.
Josh, that was awesome, man. That was awesome. There was awesome. There was info that I had never heard before like that. Yeah. I mean, I told you, man. He's super smart, man. He knows his shit.
Oh yeah, no doubt, man.
But not to hurry up and jump into something, but just to keep it rolling, because we had things that we wanted to get. Did you want to show your video, Native, and get into that video?